I think it would be fairly generous to say that for the majority of players, the Vision GT program is probably somewhere on the fence. It's a bit of a 50-50 thing. Some players love them, some players hate them, and some just don't really care either way. For me, I would put myself in the more positive side, with the caveat that, as I've said many times, I prefer it when they really use the potential of what Vision GT allows to actually be creative in an unlimited way. It's kind of like the equivalent to me of Garage 56 at Le Mans. That's where that kind of stuff is at its most interesting. It's where you can really showcase this newer technology, be it, hydrogen or maybe even electric eventually once they've sorted out the battery issues of an endurance race. That kind of thing where you really use the creativity will always appeal to me more. This one, well, to me, as I already alluded to in my 1.43 review overall, it's a disappointment, and it's one which I was actually really hoping to enjoy. I've ended up enjoying the Genesis far more. Not only from a design perspective, I personally find the Genesis a way better looking car than this, but also because of its performance. See, what I was hoping for, and what it seemed to be that they were indicating about this car, was that it was more of like a Pagani or a Spiker in terms of its purpose. Pagani, Spiker, some other brands too, they don't try to make the cars the quickest in the world, and they're designed to be cars that are pieces of art. Cars that are just to be enjoyed, just for the sake of driving. This, I was hoping, would be a prime candidate to fall into that exact same camp, but the simple thing is, at least for most of us, we found that that's not really the case. Now, with a price tag of 1 million credits, that's completely unsurprising for a Vision GT. The point level is 619 and it comes with sports tyres, which is fairly high for a vehicle with sports hard tyres, but not too crazy. It weighs exactly 1 metric ton, which is 1,000 kilos, and has just under 400 horsepower from, if I recall correctly, that motorcycle-derived engine. Of course, it's mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, and as you would assume, naturally aspirated. All of these things put together, it very clearly indicates one thing about it, and that is that it's about fun. There's no way it's trying to be the quickest thing in the world with 400 horsepower, and even the weight, it's good, but it's not remarkable. But when you actually drive it, you end up with a car which, at least on those sports tyres, is about as tail-happy as you'd probably assume, but it just feels to me like there's something not quite there. There's something lacking about this car. And it's strange, it's maybe a fault of polyphony, I don't know whose fault it could be. There's just something about the lack of character here, the lack of personality. There's just nothing to this car. It's technically quick, it's technically slip-slidey through corners, but it's kind of in the most boring way that you could possibly do that. It sounds decent enough and has a nice heads-up display, inspired of course by the Bulgari watches, which is what really the point of this vehicle is, but there's something that's kind of lacking there. And I think that's actually a pretty good way of summing up this car entirely. See, some players have been defending this car in the comments. People saying, oh, you need to give it another try, give it a few laps, really stick it out until you realise that it's quite a good car, or maybe put different tyres on it or whatever. For those players, that's great. I'm genuinely happy that some people are enjoying this car. It means that it's not a total loss. I feel like the car's lack of personality and its lack of character, despite having all of the benchmarks of something which should be one of the most fun things to drive around, it's kind of the hallmark of many of the Vision GT cars as a whole, and certainly, in my opinion at least, with this one. See, I believe this is one of the worst Vision GTs in terms of what it means, what it represents, and crucially how it was marketed. This car comes off as nothing but sleazy, in my opinion. Because, for one thing, it was advertised as coming in an update where it was not available. So that's a borderline lie. You could not get it when it was advertised as being available. As I said, if I were running things, I'd have just had it as a secret thing that was early access for the watch owners, and then just put it in the update trailer for this month instead. Then nobody's feelings would have been hurt, and it would have been hunky-dory. At the same time though, the fact that it was only designed, and let's cut through all the BS here, this was only designed to be a watch tie-in, which is even more sleazy in my opinion than all of the other manufacturers who are just basically showcasing what their next generation of cars is probably going to look like, because that's understandable for a car manufacturer. A watch manufacturer? I mean, it goes back to what I know many of you enjoyed back when I said it. Back in Gran Turismo Sport, when I talked about, I believe it was the assigning of importance to certain developmental aspects of the game, why was more effort placed on telling me what kind of Rolex Margaret Thatcher wore in the history section than into the actual career mode of the game? This smacks of that to me. Completely mismanaged. Why do you ever think we would care about a watchmaker being in the game? Now the car, I think, has potential. but what it represents I think will always leave a sour taste in my mouth because of that. Because sure, having a Bulgari car is an interesting idea. Personally, I would have preferred maybe a Rolex car, because that could have had some tie-ins to Le Mans perhaps, but I don't know, there's something about it which just comes off as disingenuous, and I think it affects my enjoyment of driving it as well. The fact that it doesn't have too much personality on top of that means that for me, even as a VGT fan, and certainly with this one having all of the building blocks to be something genuinely fun to drive, the fact that it is so meh just kind of hits even harder, and it's even more disappointing. I know that there are some players who swing the other way though, as I said, who do actually like the car. So for those, I would love to hear the reasons why. Do you find it maybe just fun to drive in general? Do you find a particular setup of tyre, maybe adding weight or removing some power makes it perfect for you? Or maybe even for a certain event, do you find it to be an OP machine? For me, as I said before, my thoughts are I would have much rather had something like a Suzuki GSX-R4 concept added in general rather than this car. It ticks many of the same boxes, even down to the motorcycle engine, but it's a way more useful machine which had tons of fans because it was genuinely good. This one is kind of just meh, and that's coming from someone who is a fan of the idea behind Vision GT. But I'd love to hear your thoughts either way, and of course that caps us off for all of my reviews of 1.43. Of course, I will be featuring more content pretty much every week, generally speaking, from Gran Turismo 7, so stick around for that, and of course, I'll see you next time. But for now, thanks for watching.